This podcast is part of the Zeo to Hero Podcast Network.
AvenuePodcast.net.
Hello, all my beautiful people. It's time for another fun episode of If You Give a Dad a Podcast. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who are here right now listening to this episode. Whether this be your first time listening or if you are a long time listener, I appreciate you being here. And we're going to have a lot of fun today on this episode. I'm talking with a man named Buster Moody. He is an artist, a creator. He does all kinds of cool stuff with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the comic book, and he has so much more that he does. And we're going to get into that here in just a minute. This is going to be a lot of fun today. I think you guys are really going to enjoy what he has to say. We get in depth with comic books and even some music stuff as well at the beginning. It's just an all-around great episode. So I think you guys are going to enjoy this ride. And for those of you who are here just to listen to the Buster Moody episode, welcome. I hope you enjoy what you hear, and I hope that you stick around and listen to some of the other great episodes I have here as well. So if you guys are as excited as I am, then let's get this show on the road.
If You Give a Dad a Podcast.
You're bloody welcome! You know.
Hey, Dad.
If I get my hand stuck in a pickle jar, I'm straight up bull in a china shop, just swinging around.
Started writing songs when I was about 12 or so.
Seriously?
They're retrofitting me now, and
I'm like, yes, finally.
I also had the opportunity to go train with Hoist Gracie and Dan Severin.
Wow.
I like that. That's different. Stands out.
That day I took my very first bump and it was fun.
There's only one section to go through first.
Yeah.
Toys.
Bro.
I was like, no, man, surely this guy's not booked out that long.
I haven't laughed that hard since I was a little girl.
What?
Man, this guy won't shut up.
And just a reminder before we get started here, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to iGadap wherever it is you're listening to. Hit that notification bell so you are notified when a new episode drops. Also, make sure that you go out there and rate and review this episode. Tell me what you think of it. And the more people that do that, the more likely I am to be recommended to somebody else. Now, on to the show. All right, everybody. So this one is really cool. I'm really excited about this. This is a guy that I met at ArtCon in Neosho. And I saw some of his work online. I think it was a couple days before that, I saw that he posted that he was going to be there. And so I commented back and said, well, I'll see you there. And I made sure to go and see him at his table. He is a comic book artist. He also, I didn't know this, but I thought this was really cool. He makes Beatz and he does animation. He is the artist behind the comic for the Vince Staples show on Netflix, the Limbo Beach. He's also done some work with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Godzilla in Hell. And I am talking about Buster Moody. Man, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well, Jared. Yeah, thank you for having me. And thank you for that intro. So, yeah.
Definitely. You've done all kinds of really cool stuff. And we'll just kind of jump right into it. And I want to talk about some of the different things that you've done, as well as, like I said, we met at ArtCon, and it was a really cool event. That was my first one to actually have like a booth there and everything. And how often do you actually get to do the different cons?
That's the second year that I've done ArtCon.
Okay.
So my wife and I started having kids basically in around 2016. So prior to 2016, I was doing anywhere from like 12 to, I think the most was like 18 shows a year. So,
oh, wow.
So I was traveling a lot for those shows at the time.
Yeah.
But then, I started having kids. So I pumped the brakes on that and really only traveled to a handful of shows after that. Like I would go to Heroes and Emerald City in Seattle and then Chicago. Okay. So basically it's like, all right, well, I have the left, the right, and the center part of the country kind of covered, but
right.
So But then so then 2020 happened, and then since 2020 happened, I like COVID and everything, I really haven't gotten back into like flying and traveling out to shows. Since that time, my wife and I have also had several more kids. I have 4 children now, so.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, so I mean, which is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as traveling goes, it just makes it a lot more difficult
Right.
for me. So
Totally
but
understand that.
yeah, I still love to do the regional shows. So I'll still do like all the local shows that'll have me as guests and all of the regional shows. So I do several shows in Kansas City, which is where I'm from. That's where I'm located at. So
Okay.
on the Missouri side is where I'm at. But so
Right
Kansas
on.
City, Missouri, I'm there. There's several shows in KC that I go to every year, and yeah, Neo Show had me down for ArtCon, which was really nice. And there's like a handful of just other shows, Wichita, that I'll do. I still do. We'll do shows in like Columbia, Missouri, or St. Louis also. So
Yeah.
I've done several shows down in Springfield, Missouri too.
Yeah.
So and yeah, so I still like to get out and do shows every once in a while. I would say that probably I do 5 or 6 now, maybe like 8 tops a year. So I don't really go push it past that. So
Right on.
yeah.
Right on. Yeah, and I mean, you're naming all great places. I'm from that area myself. I was born in Independence, Missouri, and then
Nice, okay.
Like Greene County and Webster County, Missouri is pretty much my family. So
Okay,
I
yeah.
know all of that area pretty well. And yeah, I mean, it's cool that you're able to still get out and do this, because I'm a dad myself. I have 2 kids, and I know how difficult it can be to, like you said, travel when you have children, and be able to plan these things, because having kids, you have new things that come up that you have to plan for and everything. So the calendar gets a little bit full a lot faster now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, my kids are, my oldest is 7, but I mean, and then the next one down is 5. So I mean, they're to the age where they have activities. We do, in the summertime, we do swimming lessons, we do soccer, and my son likes martial arts and stuff like that. So my daughter did ballet. So it's like,
Okay.
yeah, it gets very busy once they start getting their own interests, and you try and you want to help foster their interests, and then it's like, all right, well, now we have all of these evenings per week are kind of spoken for, so
Yeah, definitely.
there's just a lot less time to get personal stuff done, I guess, whenever you're kind of focused on instead on raising children. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, I said something. I didn't know that you actually like make music and stuff too.
Yeah. So I make beats, and I used to play shows also. That's another thing that I used to be a lot more active and involved with, kind of the scene and the beat culture around Kansas City.
Okay.
So like prior to having kids, I would go and play shows and stuff like that. I think I've only done 2 performances since my first son was born. So
Okay.
so I don't really perform anymore, but at least as far as like a creative output or like a creative outlet, rather.
Yeah.
Making music for me is like such a nice, pure kind of way to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's all about feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah, and like as far as like drawing and my comic artwork and illustration and everything, things need to look right. They need to you have to put the line down in exactly the right place, things like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Whenever you're working on music, I feel like it's more naturalistic. It's more about the feeling that you have, and
Yes.
so like if I'm working on a beat or something, it's like, oh man, I like this feeling, I like this direction. I'm gonna like chase that feeling, and then kind of the music will come to you essentially. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a different creative process than illustration, but that's kind of the reason. That's the reason why I like it.
Right.
I also love using working with sample sounds. So I like
Okay.
taking something that somebody's done and reinterpreting it in a different way. I think that's really cool. It's like that's a part of like hip hop, and that's like part of that tradition, which
Right.
I always really liked the repurposing aspect of sampling. So
Yeah.
so that's just another aspect of it that I really like. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just mostly it's just a really fun, I feel like easy creative outlet for me. I never really thought that I would like be a professional beat maker or anything, but as far as like just being a musician that likes to just practice the art, that it's definitely a thing that I enjoy doing. So
Right on. Right on. Well, and you said something there, because I'm a musician myself. Yeah. And you said the way it feels and stuff. And I've had people
Yeah.
ask me before, well, how do you know what to play? And when it comes to playing drums, I used to be in a band, and they're like, well, how do you know what to play in there? Because I just play by ear. I don't read music or anything like that, unless it comes to what I played in band and stuff. And that was completely different. But I always tell them I play with my chest, it's something I feel it in my chest. This is what I need to do next in the music. And somebody who isn't musically inclined, or people don't understand that when you say that, unless you find somebody with, like what you said, you go off of what you feel, and I really like that aspect of the musical outlet.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never been technically in a band myself, but I've been in several like beat groups and crews with other producers and beat makers who I'm friends with. And a very similar thing will happen if you're collaborating with them, where, you can hear them laying down the track that they're doing. And like, as that's happening, you start having a feeling. So whenever kind of you're up and it's like, you just kind of pursue that, so it's like, it's like, well, I know the feeling, I know the vibe, and you're just kind of in it. So it's a difficult thing to explain, but it really does feel way more naturalistic to me than drawing. And maybe also that's because I'm untrained also. I don't read music. So for me, it really is just feeling it out and like just trying to find the right, that right vibe and just kind of riding that wave essentially.
Right. So would you say that, do you prefer for your outlet, say you're having a day and you just need to get something out, do you prefer to do that with music, or do you prefer to sit down and draw something for that?
Well, it kind of depends just on what's going on, like in my life and what my schedule is like at that time. So there's usually, I self-produced my own comic Laser Storm, which I keep a very, very loose schedule with. But even though I gave myself an extremely loose schedule for like the production of that book, it always still hangs heavy like in my head whenever I'm not working on it, that like I need to complete this, at least the first arc of this story at some time. So if I am like, if it is a thing where it's like, well, I only have 1 hour where I can like sit down, unless I have something that's been like penciled out for Laser Storm to where I can just ink. Like inking is very similar to me as music production, because like inking, I feel like maybe it's just because with inking, I've done it so much that it's kind of second nature to me, that it's also more of a feeling thing. But if I have something penciled out, then like I can ink it and I'll take an hour and ink and I can get a ton of inking done. But like if I need to sit down and draw or something, draw the composition or work on the storytelling from panel to panel, like the flow of the eye. If I'm actually like doing layouts and the important kind of framework of a page stuff, it's going to take longer than just an hour for me to actually get any substantial work done as far as that goes. So like, if that's the case and I just have like an evening, or if I'm just so like dead beat tired at the end of the day or something, whenever it's time for me to start working on either comics or something creative, then it's like, all right, I'm gonna just it's way easier to work with music, and that also is another time where it's nice to kind of have a sample come in, because you can kind of start with a sample and then just find like a really nice loop, and it's like, oh man, this loop is like heaven, and it's like, and I found that loop in 5 or 10 minutes and it feels like miraculous. And then from there you can just kind of like build out the rest of the track, and then like after an hour it's like, well shoot, this track is like 90% done, so and you hear sometimes of like hip hop producers or beat makers and people, they'll be like, oh man, we made that beat in the studio in 15 minutes, and it's like, and I get that, because like I definitely have had that before, where it's like sometimes in an hour I'll get super into that sample, lay something down, lay some drums down on it and be like, all right, that's like a great building block, and then move on to like another track even, so like with an hour you can just get so much more done musically, at least exploratively, in the exploration phase of finding and starting a track, than I ever could do like starting a page within an hour. Like, I'm talking about sequentials and comics,
Yeah. Well, and whenever that bit of inspiration hits you, whether you're doing drawing or music, whichever, that's when it really starts to flow, and you can't really stop the process on it either. And that's when you see people say, well, yeah, that only took 15 minutes for me to make that. And it's because you get that little bit of inspiration and it can take you a long ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that can't, not to say that can't happen with drawing too, because you can definitely get more into like a meditative state with drawing, and that's always the way that I actually used to describe it to people, was that like music production to me was more like a active type of meditation, you know. And inking to me is the same way. And then whenever you're just kind of like sketching down ideas and drawing kind of free form in your sketchbook, it's also very, very similar to that, where it's just like the ideas just start flowing. If you can like get to that kind of that groove where kind of your id and your conscious self is not present anymore, it's just kind of like you're receiving and you're kind of just channeling the stuff. I know that's a little bit of a cliche that some people will say, but that is what it feels like when you're like in that process, you know. It feels like you're just kind of like an instrument for whatever it is that you're making, you know. So like you're working in service of it rather than the other way around, I suppose. So
yeah, definitely. So do you have an actual like recording studio in your home?
I don't know, but I have I actually only have like a USB mic as far as doing vocals go, and the rest I use Logic Pro. I've used Pro Tools before also. But I do most of my production on Logic Pro, and I have MIDI instruments. So I have like a MIDI drum pad, like a MPD, which is basically like a digital MPC that you can plug into a DAW, a digital audio workstation. So like I do that, and then I have like a couple MIDI keyboards that I'll use too. So that's essentially it. But I mean, I had my music process down to where if I just had like an iPad or a laptop with me, like that's enough that I can, you know, bust something out. So you know, so I don't like to let the limitations prevent me from doing things, especially as like with the way that I approach and do music. You know, that helps kind of keep it more creative, I suppose. So it seems like limitations if you just have a laptop or something, but it's like you can do all the same things, you just maybe don't have the same spread. So
like around what age did you like realize that you had this talent for drawing and even for music?
Well, so music was always an interest of mine. That was something that I always wanted to do as a kid, but I never really I had a Casio keyboard maybe when I was in middle school. And I kind of dubbed my own cassette tapes at that time. So that's kind of how that started.
That's cool.
Eventually in high school, I got a program called Fruity Loops, and I started just doing kind of like dance beats. So like more up-tempo kind of type music. And then eventually I became friends with people that were music producers whenever I was in college. And that's when I really got more into like doing a little bit more of like the sample-based hip-hop type stuff. So
Gotcha.
So that, as far as music, that's kind of how that went. But with drawing, there was like a catalyst moment whenever I was a kid. And I guess it was when I was like in second grade. I had an art teacher, Mrs. Osman, that one of our assignments was basically to bring a piece of art or bring a drawing or an illustration to class, and then you're supposed to like replicate the drawing. So my parents had like this 32-ounce plastic cup with like Joe Montana on it, basically like doing a throw. So like I drew that, and I guess that the you know, the way that I drew his figure and his body and his proportions really impressed my teacher. And she said, you know, for like, that's not something that's common for kids your age to be able to like see the way that a body is twisted or positioned that way, you know. So just her telling me that like it wasn't common for you know, for other kids to be able to draw like that and to be able to see that, to me made me feel like I was special. So I was like, oh, I can do a thing that other people can't do, you know. So I'm gonna try and explore that, you know. I'd started drawing before that, obviously, but I do remember at that point, that was the thing that made me be like, oh, I'm just gonna go keep on drawing. Like, you know, before that drawing was a thing that I did, you know, just like semi-regularly, just as like a hobby. And after that, it was like, oh, I'm just gonna keep on drawing forever, probably. So, so that was definitely the moment for me.
Right on.
Yeah, and that was like in maybe second grade. By like, you know, third, fourth, and fifth grade, I already had like you know, the ruled notebooks, and I would just draw comics in those. So just copying like old Extreme comics, old Image comics, early 90s comic books, whatever I could get my hands on at that time. So
imagine talking to yourself back then and being able to tell you that you would be able to work with people like Image and stuff like that.
Oh, I know. I would have lost my mind as a kid if I knew that I would actually be able to draw the Ninja Turtles like in any sort of official capacity, So
yeah,
like that's one of the ways that I learned how to draw was by copying coloring books, like the poses of the turtles, Ninja Turtles,
okay,
and Power Rangers from coloring books, So
yeah,
that was a thing that I really liked doing because they always had them in like dynamic poses on each coloring book page, So
yeah,
I distinctly remember that as like a 5 and 6 year old, just like copying some of those poses. So, and then if you copy it, then you can color it again too. So like,
yeah, definitely.
So you can color the first one, and then you copy the drawing, and you can color it again. So yeah.
So there's one thing that I actually went out and I bought the omnibus for, and you were one of the creators. I think it was either the second or the third issue, and it was Godzilla in Hell.
Oh yeah, yeah, Godzilla in Hell #3 I drew. Yeah,
that's right. Okay, and how did you get into that? What did they come to you, or what happened with that?
With that issue in particular, it was the same editor that I had been working with on a couple things that I had done for the Ninja Turtles at that time. That was part of it. And then another one of my friends at the time that I had seen at some shows and stuff, Ulysses Fireness. He's one of the writers of that issue, and he was supposed to actually be the one that drew it at first, but due to some sort of scheduling conflict or something, he wasn't going to be able to draw it. So he suggested me to Bobby. Bobby so happened to be the editor that I'd been talking to at TMNT, with the TMNT stuff that I had done, which at that point I think was only a couple covers, but but by that point, Bobby knew me and we'd worked together. So basically we were like, all right, yeah, this would be cool. And so yeah, he offered it to me through that. So so that's kind of how that one ended up happening. And that was awesome too. That was really, really cool. Yeah, that was an interesting experience. It was fun drawing that issue. So
yeah, I love that story. I mean, it's so interesting and unique of a story, because there's even parts of it you don't need words to tell the story of what's going on, a lot of times in there. And so I really enjoyed reading that whole thing.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I do. I try and focus on storytelling, like as an illustrator. That's the most important thing to me, at least as far as whenever I'm laying out sequential pages and everything. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
It was a fun challenge also. Like that was probably the first and probably since then the only comic that I've done that had almost no dialogue whatsoever.
Right.
In fact, the only dialogue I think is like, I think the God Mountain yells at him, and maybe like the Mothra Angels communicate with him for a second, and then and that's essentially it. So maybe like Space Godzilla basically becomes like the devil down there. I think he talks to him also, or he laughs at him or something. But other than that, yeah, there's no dialogue in the entire issue. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
To be able to do that. It was fun. I really like the themes of that story too. I feel like a lot of the themes are about like self-assurance and kind of finding your own way, not being pulled by any side of any discussion, So I kind of I like it for a lot of reasons. So I'm happy that you appreciate the kind of the silent aspect of it, because that was like a fun challenge at the time.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple things that I saw of yours that I'm not too familiar with. So I thought I'd ask you about that and give you kind of an opportunity to kind of tell me what that is and tell my listeners what that is. Task Force Rad Squad. What exactly is that?
So Task Force Rad Squad was the first creator-owned book that I made with my buddy, co-creator, and the writer Caleb Goulner.
Okay.
So he's a friend of mine. He used to write for Comics Alliance, and he's also since then written a few TMNT things and a few Sonic things, and he's done a handful of things for IDW. And he's a great writer, super funny dude. I love Caleb. He's awesome. So yeah, we were friends basically at the time. Him and his wife were living here in Kansas City. So basically he was looking for an artist to do like a Power Rangers pastiche comic. And I had some like circumstances at that time that basically were like, that pointed me in the direction of, you should do this comic. So him and I did that book, and basically we started it, and then every year we would just do a single issue until we got to 6 issues, and that's basically when we stopped doing the series. So
okay.
So we did 6 issues of that Task Force Rad Squad. It's like a it's basically a Power Rangers or Tokusatsu Super Sentai kind of satire pastiche. So like teenage kids that live like in a coastal town that's always being attacked by giant monsters.
Gotcha.
That's essentially the premise. So but it's kind of like, what if these kids were very self-involved, kind of as selfish and almost embodiments of at that point, like the picture that the public had of like the millennial kind of post-ironic mindset. So it was kind of like a little bit of that mixed in with just like our appreciation of Power Rangers and giant robots fighting monsters and stuff.
Gotcha. So you've brought up Power Rangers a couple times now. I'm guessing you grew up with it like I did.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite Ranger?
A favorite series and a favorite Ranger?
Oh, my favorite series would be Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. That's the only one I've seen in total. So, but I like all of them.
Yeah.
I like all the ones that I've seen. I really loved Turbo also whenever I was younger. But as far as the the series, I love Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And I always liked Jason. So and Tommy, of course, I guess. So those were my favorite. Maybe that's the cliche answer, but
well, I actually got to meet Austin St. John. I think it was last year, I think it was, and then I got to meet Steve Cardenas this year, Rocky. Okay. So nice. I've gotten to. They've both come to the Northwest Arkansas Con, so that's why I was asking you, because we've definitely got to get you to come here, because they have a really cool con that we have, and we've had some really cool guests. But Power Rangers is a big one for me too. Right behind me.
Man, if you know the guys that run that show, have them reach out to me. That'd be cool.
Oh, I don't know them I don't know them personally and everything, but I wish I did.
Okay, well,
but right behind me, I have like all the Funkos and stuff from the original Power Rangers. So that's
awesome. Nice.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of all that. I'm gonna take my blue one that I just got, and I'm gonna get it signed by David Yost. So that'll, just. I was a Blue Ranger.
You said he's going to be at that show?
He is going to be at the one that I'm going to in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the Trotham Con. Cool. Yes. So that one's next month. That one's really cool. They already had somebody cancel on it. I was kind of sad about. Did you ever get into Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Not too much. Whenever I was a kid, I liked the movie a lot. But by the time I loved the movie a lot as a kid. In fact, like I had a friend who we did like his birthday party, and that was like the movie that they rented for some reason.
Really?
Like it had to have been like 3rd or 4th grade. Also, it was. So I thought that was really awesome. But by the time like I wasn't super into the show too much. I never got super into it, but
right on. Well, they were supposed to have Spike there, and he actually today he canceled that he wasn't going to be able to be there and stuff. So I was like, no. So I'm just hoping nobody else has to cancel on this one. So
yeah, for sure.
You brought up Joe Montana. Would that happen to be the time that when he was in Kansas City with the Chiefs?
It would, yeah. I think my parents had like one of the. I think they may have gone to like one of the games and just kept the cup from the game. So that's a thing that my folks would do. So we had a handful of Chiefs cups and Royals cups that they got from whenever they went to the game. So
right on, yeah. Do you watch a lot of like the Chiefs games and stuff? Are you keeping up with it?
I actually don't know. Yeah, I feel like I just have like such little precious time that like my interests for the hobbies that I do have are kind of so intense that it's hard for me to kind of like spread my interest out, you know, even
I
though
get
I know
that.
that like it's a huge cultural thing.
Yeah.
You know, all the people that I see throughout the day are super into it. So
Oh yeah.
yeah. I the thing that I know of the most right now is the controversy with like the stadium and all that stuff that's been kind of like big talking points, at least here in KC. So
Oh, okay. What's going
both
on?
like the Chiefs and the Royals, they're talking about like relocating, like
Oh,
turning the Arrowhead area into like some sort of entertainment district and relocating the Royals to like the Crossroads area of downtown Kansas City. I think they just actually voted on it today, so
oh
I
wow.
wonder if the results are in, but
Huh.
a lot of people don't like the idea. So at
Right.
least as far as the normal people that I've known and talked to about
Yeah.
it, but.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a staple there in Kansas City, you know. So, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I can understand where people might be a little upset about that.
yeah. I think the only thing is people just honestly, I think it's a lot of people that live down south and on the Kansas side that don't like having to drive like 35
Yeah,
minutes east of the city to get to the stadium. You're
I
from
got you.
Independence, so like it's right there for where where around where you were.
Yeah.
And like I live in the Northland, so I mean it's about 25 half minutes, half an hour away.
Okay.
Um, but so like yeah, I don't mind it. I don't really go to a lot of those games. Like I went to a preseason Chiefs game a few years ago, and I did go to a couple Royals games last year,
Right
but
on.
it's not like it's mostly as a social thing. It's like got some friends that are going to the game or something, so I'll
Gotcha.
just kind of hang out. So
Totally understand that. Uh,
yeah.
so you were bringing up hobbies and stuff. What kind of hobbies do you have?
Well, I mean, so comics, I'm a huge collector. So like
Okay.
I collect comics, I collect records. So
Oh,
uh yeah, things like that. Yeah, like as I said, I guess your show is not visual, but like
right.
usually my space right now, if your listeners can picture a space that was filled with like, six large bookshelves and that were just filled with all books and comics and graphic novels. And right now my space is empty because we're moving a bunch of stuff, but
Yeah.
I love just kind of being surrounded by things that I'm super interested in. I really like collecting art books also, especially by comic creators that I'm into, artist editions.
Yeah.
One hobby that I got super into in 2020 that has kind of persisted since then. Whenever the lockdown was going on and happening, I got really into doing my own custom bound comics. So like
Okay.
uh, essentially, collecting the run, completing the run, and then
Uh-huh.
sewing them all together, gluing them, binding them,
Oh,
and
cool.
then basically making a book out of them. So that's a thing that I've done with. I guess I've made four of them myself. But then I also, since just getting into them, it's kind of like its own sub niche of collecting comics anyway. Are
Right.
all of these custom bound books that people have, and like I don't know. I feel like once I get set back up with all of my collection and books and everything back in order, I feel like that's going to be like another, rabbit hole that I go down hardcore, where it's just kind of getting a bunch of customs made, and if not made, I'll find some that other people have made. But
Yeah.
I've completed several runs that it's like, man, some of this stuff is never going to be collected. I don't think, whether just because legal things or whatever reasons ownership has changed as far as
Right.
some of those Image Comics books, the stuff that Rob Liefeld used to make, a lot of the old Wildstorm stuff,
Uh-huh.
stuff that Alan Moore did with Image Comics also. So it's like a lot of that stuff I like to collect with the eventual idea in mind that I'm going to bind these. So
Okay.
uh, so that's kind of one of my persistent hobbies is that. Um, so yeah, that's probably the biggest one, honestly, is just kind of collecting comics and hunting down certain runs and trying to, fill gaps in my runs and stuff like that. So
Right on. Right on. Yeah, I know I mean that sounds like a lot of fun. I didn't know that that was actually a thing, but that sounds like pretty cool to me.
yeah, I was
So,
able to find a few. Luckily, there were a few guys on YouTube that like were gracious enough to upload tutorials on their process of how they made these books.
Okay.
Well, there's like a handful of dudes that did, and there's some of them that are good, some of them that are not as good, but some of the good tutorials on there are great for basically just. I mean, the same rules apply to binding almost anything.
Yeah.
But like if you want to do it for comics specifically, there are some really good tutorials with some guys that have shown the process of how to do it. So
okay.
The first one that I did, I decided to start with like a small. It was still a book that I don't think would ever get like a print here in English. It's what was that book called? Chrono War.
Okay.
So it's a manga book that Dark Horse, published in single issues. Like they did maybe eight single issues of the series in like the early 90s. There's never been a collection of it in English, and I doubt that there ever will be. So I had already had a few doubles of most of that run anyway. So I was like, I'm going to take all the doubles that I have, and rather than damaging the good ones that I have, I'm going to go ahead and make, I'm going to test my binding skills with this one. So I just started with that one.
Okay.
I learned from the mistakes that I made on that one, and then like the three that I made after that have been pretty good. They're pretty nice. I haven't designed or had dust covers printed yet for them, but that's another eventual thing that I'm going to do further down the line is actually sit down in Photoshop and design my own dust covers for them. I think that'll be a lot of fun too.
That would be really cool. I'd love to see that whenever you get that done. So this is going to sound kind of off subject, but you brought up Image Comics a minute ago, and there's one that I've never been able to find again that I had as a kid, and I want to see if you know what I'm talking about because I can't find it. It was kind of like the Fantastic Four, and but the guy's name, one of the guys was, instead of the Thing, it was the Planet, and then there was a guy that instead of him stretching like Mr. Fantastic, he was made out of crystals, and then instead of flames. For the Human Torch, it was electricity, and the woman was like,
Are you sure
gas.
Are you sure this is an Image comic, or was this like an Eclipse or Eternity comic called The Elementals? Maybe. Are you thinking of The Elementals?
I don't know, because I was a kid when I had this. I could have swore it was an Image comic, but I could be wrong.
I'm very curious about it now. I'm actually gonna look it up real quick.
Yeah, and I only remember the one issue, but I never could find.
And it came out in the 90s?
It came out in the early 90s. It would have been probably 93, 94 or something like that.
Okay, well, maybe it wasn't Elementals then. Elementals is very similar because like the Fantastic Four is all based on the four elements, of course, also,
Right, yes.
So like the Elementals was published in 1984, it says, and was created by Bill Willingham. But your description of the characters was fairly similar. So like, yeah, Monolith was like the rock guy. Fathom fell off a boat and had the water abilities. Vortex was a pilot and received air-related powers. And Morningstar had he burned to death and got pyrotechnic powers. Does that sound like those characters or
no?
No. Well, maybe it's something different then. It's totally possible. Rob Liefeld also created basically spin-offs of every, he had his own kind of version of all of these different kind of well-known characters too. So it's entirely possible that there's some obscure extreme comic or something that has those, those same basic, building blocks.
Right. This dude had a planet for a head. And everything and he was like the Thing and stuff. And it's I never have been able to find it, but I thought I'd give it a shot asking you.
Well, I'm curious about that too. It sounds good. That's another one of my collecting interests, in hobbies, is collecting small press and more obscure books from like the 80s and 90s.
Okay.
So like my big focus on that is kind of like the post TMNT black and white indie boom stuff. So I love like all that whole rush of publishers that came out in like the mid to late 80s.
Okay.
All kind of trying to replicate the success of the Turtles. So I love collecting those books.
Right.
Whenever I dig through like $1 or 50-cent bins, like the shit bins, those are the ones that I really love. Kind of, I love those kind of diamonds in the rough,
Yep.
Sometimes they're even like rough in the rough, but like there's still there's something good in them that you're gonna find. So So even if it's just kind of like the charming way that it's drawn or however it's done, there's always like a sincerity and enthusiasm to those books, because I feel like at that time the zeitgeist was, the Turtles, and that started off as like a super obscure, tiny, small press, black and white book, so
Right.
You can just kind of feel the energy, that electricity in the air with all of these other books that kind of come out around that time, that like each one of them has so much put into it, and each one of them feels like they really thought they were going to be like the next Turtles, so
Right. Yeah.
so I really like that sincerity, and I guess that enthusiasm is kind of like infectious to me, even though I know in hindsight that none of them became as successful as the Turtles. It still is really, it's a really fun kind of time period and niche area of comics that I've found myself drawn to. So,
Yeah.
But in addition to like the '80s, the '80s black and white boom stuff, I also do love the post-image small press stuff, because there were a bunch of smaller publishers in like the '90s that were kind of trying to hop on the Image bandwagon also, and I like a lot of those books too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Image and otherwise. So
Yeah, that was me. I actually was introduced to Image at a younger age. My dad was a big comic book fan, and he's the one who actually got me into comics and stuff, which is kind of funny because my dad is also a pastor of a church,
Oh, okay.
So you wouldn't think of that being the person to get you introduced to comic books and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I remember the first time I got a Savage Dragon comic book, and that was like the coolest thing ever to me.
I'll bet,
I was
yeah.
probably way too young to be reading it. But
I'm sure you were. Which do you remember which issue it was? Do you remember what happens?
So I remember that he had to use like these chainsaws and it was like a rat guy that he was facing in it.
That sounds awesome. That sounds right. Yeah. I don't know which issue that is off the top of my head, but
yeah,
I had the first miniseries of Savage Dragon growing up, so I read those first 3 issues kind of like religiously as a kid for a period of time.
I want to say it was one of the first ones, because
well, there is a guy that has razors all over him that cuts up Savage Dragon, and he's just kind of like covered in blood, and like there's some crazy stuff that happens in that, but I don't remember any chainsaws in that first miniseries. But
maybe it wasn't a chainsaw. But so what? The front cover of it is him standing there, and he has like blood on his face, and he's like holding a machine gun. Like,
okay. That sounds like several Savage Dragon covers. Honest,
yeah, that's true. But yeah, I just remember that. I mean, I Image was probably, I liked that a lot. They caught my attention more than some of the other ones did, I think.
Oh, me too. Yeah, as a kid, especially when I was like a grade school age, the image books were the ones that jumped off the stands to me. Like. Yeah. I would occasionally flip through some of the late '80s Marvel and DC books, and at that time, those almost seemed boring to me.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe with the exception of like some of the Jim Lear Silvestri stuff and like the Uncanny X-Men, like those issues were awesome to me. Still,
yeah.
But I think a lot of that was just my affinity for the characters. I think I was able to get over that. But like as far as exploring new characters, I loved the Image stuff because. Really, it was mostly just about how cool it looked, like how bombastic and in your face and larger than life the panels and the characters were. So like that's the thing I also really like, that kind of that unabashed enthusiasm. And you could just tell those guys were so pumped to not be drawing for Marvel anymore, Right. Like it looked like they were having so much fun on almost all of those first arcs of each of those first Image books are just like. I love that stuff. Like that stuff is really legitimately my jam. So I love all those early Image books a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So where do you draw a lot of your inspiration when it comes from your style?
So like stylistically, I would say probably early on, the biggest influences to me were some of those Image guys and like Eastman and Laird. I loved the Turtles books, and I always loved how dense and textured the style was too.
Yeah.
And like that kind of like my love for the turtle stuff and the cross hatching there kind of led me to discover artists like R. Crumb. I know that he's kind of fallen out of people's favor as far as socially is concerned the last couple decades.
Right. Yeah.
So, but, at least as far as like his technique, whenever I was like I remember specifically in middle school seeing some of his drawings and just being obsessed with how he was able to like define form and value just with lines.
Yeah.
Like it was incredible to me that like he could draw, you know, a sphere and it would look like a sphere, but it's all just with hatching. So I kind of became like obsessed with hatching. So like yeah, so Crumb was a big one for me. Also, and at that same time, I was a big fan of like Travis Charest, who was working on Wildcats. Wildcats was a huge comic for me. I collected that basically my entire childhood. I loved Wildcats. So once Travis Charest was on there, he blew my mind. And then eventually he left Wildcats and started drawing for Jodorowsky. He was doing let's see, one of the Meta Barons spin-off books. He was supposed to be doing his own Meta Baron, the entire album, which he eventually they replaced him because he wasn't able to hit his deadline or whatever. But that then introduced me to Mobius. And once I became introduced to Mobius's work, I basically was like, all right, I'm done with these American comics for a while. Like I need to just completely immerse myself into like for me at that age, I was probably 14 or 15. Like my mind was completely blown by like the NCAL and by you know, the limited amount of Mobius stuff that I could find in like a heavy metal magazine or like in some, you know, Dark Horse used to occasionally, you know, they did like an Airtight Garage black and white reprint, stuff like that. So so any little just tiny thing that I could get my hands on that was Mobius, I tried to hunt down. I think actually at that time Humanoids was recoloring the NCAL, so so some of the stuff that Humanoids did with DC Comics, I think they had like a joint publishing venture or something at that time. I picked up a lot of those books, which then introduced me to like Juan Jimenez and Inky Bilal, Francois Chouetin, like and then like all of those artists basically showed me that like, you know, there was like a certain amount of refinement to their work that I never could really find in the Western American comics, you know. So like the American comic industry is more about it's more like just a production line, you know. So just try and get the books out as quickly as possible. You need to stay on the monthly schedule. Whereas like the European model at that time, to me, it was like, oh, well, they're called albums. And the way that they approached them was essentially like the same way that a group or band or musician would do an album, where they have a year or however long to finish this one album. And that's what they're working on, you know? So it's not the constant pressure of like the monthly deadline. So I felt like that they were able to, with that kind of process in place, the level of refinement and completion that their work was at was something that I had never seen before. And then also around that time, I like around, you know, 14 to 16 years old is when I was introduced to like Masamune Shirow and so like Appleseed and Ghost in the Shell, then Katsuhiro Tomo and Akira. So like my kind of top influences, my top three influences that I'll say, I consider like Eastman and Laird, that influence is one. And then Mobius is another of my biggest, and then Katsuhiro Otomo. So like those are, I would say they influence me. I'm nowhere near the level of any of those artists, but those are like my aspirational artists, you know, like the ones that I'm like,
right on. These
are the dudes that make the best comics that I like and impacted me more than anything else. That's kind of like I would say my top three of influences.
All right. So I know that there's another thing that you do a lot of, and that's people commission you to make different pieces for them. Do you have a favorite one that you've done?
Oh, a favorite commission?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really tough. I don't know if I have a favorite commission. I've drawn hundreds of commissions over the years, so so I've done a lot of pieces. The biggest commission that I've done and the most labor-intensive one, which I think you probably saw the print of at the ArtCon in Neosho, was a Find Master Splinter piece.
Okay.
Which essentially is like a Where's Waldo with like 100 different TMNT characters on it. So, yeah, so that one I also made prints of. So that one's been a huge success for me, kind of across the board. At least as far as like, it's the piece that I have taken that took me the longest amount of time to finish. It's the piece that like I put the most amount of work into but like also, I feel like a lot of people really like that piece. The response that I got after I posted it was so huge that I was like, well, I got to make prints of this, you know. So I like that one a lot. That one was really fun. But yeah, I really can't think of a favorite one. Like there were a few of them where I was like, man, if I didn't sell my work, I would definitely keep this piece, you know. But
Right.
but that so rarely happens anymore. Like because now I kind of have always just resolved it within myself that like this piece is going to somebody. I'm doing this for them. It's not for me, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so like I really yeah, I try and make it good every time. Like I try and make them all like the best piece that I've done. I would always like for my latest commission to be my favorite one that I've done, but that's not
Right.
always the case. Last year I did a few that I thought were really good. I did like a fully painted Gwenpool piece. That one was really fun.
Yeah, I think I saw that one.
Yeah, I did that one like as a Electra Assassin homage almost. So which I love that Bill Sienkiewicz Electra Assassin cover where she's like standing there with her back, she's like holding the giant oversized gun.
Yep.
So that was a really fun one from last year. I also did a Godzilla versus Optimus Prime piece near the end of last year. I liked that one a lot. That was a lot of fun. And then I did like a Galactus and Silver Surfer piece last year that I really enjoyed.
Okay.
And this year I've done some commissions that I really like. I just did a Cyclops piece that was a lot of fun. I just mailed that one out today.
Oh, cool.
I'm gonna try and color that one. So the dude said, you know, that he there was something else he was gonna have me draw, but he said that him and his girlfriend had just finished watching the first few X-Men 97 issues, so he wanted to have me draw that Cyclops. So
gotcha.
So that was a lot of fun to do. I grew up on the original X-Men animated series also, so all that stuff hits the sweet spot for me. So
I had one of the VHS tapes at my grandma's house, and I watched it so much it stopped working right. So
nice.
So
we had a few of the VHSs. Like there was one that was like a pizza, or two of them that came with a Pizza Hut meal.
Okay.
So like the you can still see the advertisements in the back of comics from that time. Like Joe Mad did the drawing for like one of the advertisements, but I'm pretty sure it may have even been his artwork that was on like the box, the personal pizza that you ordered that was part of like the deal.
Okay.
But like the first two episodes of the series, there's like a VHS that came out with each of those, and they both have introductions from Stan Lee, and they talk to the at the time the current like artists and writers that were on the major X books, so like on X-Men and Uncanny X-Men and X-Force and stuff. So I'm trying to remember who all he talks to in those, but as a kid I always skipped the interviews and just went right to I would just fast forward through those just so I could get to the episode. But
now you wish you had them to where you could watch the interviews too, right?
I do know for a fact that they had artwork from like John Romita Jr. So like the times that I did actually watch them, I would stop it and take like a mental note of the cool artwork in the background, so that way I could flip through the pages at the comic shop and try and locate like the specific issue that they were showing. So
that's cool.
So I was able to find like a couple like JR, you know, Uncanny issues that he had drawn, and a couple of the, you know, the new X-Men series that Jim Lee had done at that time too. So and Andy Kubert too. I love all that stuff.
Yeah. So I actually have a favorite of the ones that I've seen on yours here recently, and it's the Body Count Raph.
Oh yeah.
I love that one. That one's so cool.
Yeah, that one was a lot of fun to do also. I've been wanting to do, so that one wasn't even technically a commission. I've just been wanting to draw Body Count Raph for a couple of years now. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna there was one night last week where actually it was very similar to kind of like the music thing that I was telling you about, where it was just like, all right, well, I've got a few hours tonight. I think I'm just gonna like rough out this drawing, and then that was one of those drawings that just like it happened so fast that it was kind of just like, you know, going into the fugue state or something, you know. So so that was that was a fun one. I love Body Count. So I ended up doing that piece, and then like I posted, you know, online, if anybody has like the Body Count hardcover collection, I'll trade this piece for it. So I was actually able to score one of those Body Count hardcover collections, which are pretty difficult to buy. So I have a few of the single issues, and actually they changed a lot of things between the single issues and the hardcover collection too.
Really?
Yeah, so now it makes me wonder like how many different versions of that story there actually are out there, But and they changed all the borders. All the borders are black now instead of like they had white borders on the single issues originally. And I think some of the, like there were a few little mistakes that Beasley had made. Like I think he gave the turtles, 4 or 5 fingers and toes in some of the drawings and forgot the shells in a few cases, where I think they fixed all of that in the hardcover. But I think that like you can still see a few of those instances in those first original single issues that they put out. But,
yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize, or I didn't know that they had, changed it. But I mean, that does make sense too, though.
But yeah, so like that was kind of like I basically told my wife and myself about a month, well, almost probably 2 months ago, that I was putting a book embargo on myself to where I would not allow myself during this time period where we're like packing and moving and all of this. It's like, all right, I'm not going to buy books, for a while. I'm going to stop buying books. So that was kind of my way to break my own rules, so I could still get a book that I really wanted without having to actually pay for it. So
right. Just having just a box open to where you can put the stuff that you just bought in there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of my way of getting around that one. But that's another thing that I do as far as commissions go. I do have like an open offer. I should post about it more frequently, but I love collecting artist editions too. I can't always justify the price, what with 4 kids and everything. So occasionally I'm like, if anybody has these artist editions or is willing to like, buy a specific artist edition for me or run it by me, I'll recreate any of the pages, any single page or piece within that artist edition.
That's cool.
As a trade for the book. So
okay.
So I have a handful of artist editions that I've gotten that way. I got like the Daredevil Born Again artist edition that way. I got like the Jack Kirby New Gods artist edition that way. So
okay.
So yeah, I've been able to get a couple books that way too. So but yeah, I seriously am addicted to buying books. I have a problem. So it's like
well, that's the first step is admitting it.
I know. I have to like set these limitations on myself, and even whenever I like make these rules and limitations, I still find ways to like break my rules. So it's yeah.
So one thing that I brought up at the beginning was the Vince Staples show, and you actually do the artwork for the comic on there, correct?
So the show is separate from the comic book.
Okay.
But it is all under the banner of Vince, as a creative force in and of himself. So. Yeah. The comic that we did came out, I guess technically it came out last year, or maybe the end of the year before that. But so yeah, that's like my latest, or not my latest, but that was the last kind of official big graphic novel project that I did was that Limbo Beach is what that book was called.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Vince was one of the writers on the book. He's the creator. It was his concept.
Okay.
And then he worked with a few other writers to kind of figure out the story, and then they did the script, and then I ended up doing the artwork for it. So
that's cool.
So yeah, the basic concept of that, I guess the elevator pitch of that book is essentially it's like Children of the Corn meets the Warriors with superpowers. So it's kind of like this kid washes up on an island and he has superpowers, yet all of the other kids on this island also have powers, and they've kind of already split themselves off into different little gangs and groups, like little crews and stuff. So the main character that we follow washes up on the island, and his power is to either lessen or to boost other characters' powers. So there kind of becomes like this almost like tug of war to get this character to kind of be on certain teams because of the abilities that he has. So that's kind of like a very rough, overview of what the book is, but that's essentially what that book is.
Right on. So do you have any goals set for this next year?
So for this next year, I guess by the end of this year, it would be really awesome if I could have kind of this first Laser Storm chapter done. We'll see how far I get on that. I've kind of been averaging 1 or 2 chapters per year, and I'm trying to get the first arc done, which will probably be about 6 to 8 chapters. So I'm on chapter 3, or I'm on actually, I guess, chapter Yeah, I'm like in the middle of chapter 3 right now, so it's been kind of slow going. And it's on again, off again. Whenever I was working on, I started the book before I did Limbo Beach. Then I worked on Limbo Beach, so I didn't do anything on the book for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
And then I picked it back up again last year and got a chapter done. So I'm hoping to get at least 2 or 3 chapters done by the end of this year, which will get me really close to kind of getting to the end of the first arc, the first actual major story. With these characters in Laser Storm, and then I will maybe crowdfund it or try and find a publisher. I'm not actually too concerned about that. For me, it's more about me just finishing the book that I want to tell. This is the first story that I've ever like written and drawn myself.
Okay.
So it's just kind of a new process for me. I'm trying to kind of stay loose with my expectations for myself and my, self-imposed deadlines, just so that way it stays fun and doesn't become like a chore.
Right.
So many projects in the past that I've taken on are very fun at first, and then kind of whenever you get really into it, it just becomes a drag, and then like resentment starts to build, and then exhaustion is real. Also, just kind of getting burnout of the characters and what you're working on. So I just don't want that to happen with Laser Storm. So anytime I start to feel those sort of things, I'll step back for a while and maybe focus on commissions or just ideation for different comics and concepts that I want to eventually make. So
yeah. So kind of explain what Laser Storm is about to me a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Laser Storm, it's kind of it takes place in the future, and in the future, all of the so I don't know if you knew this or not, but giants used to roam the Earth. We're on. Giants used to roam this Earth. But due to like certain circumstances, climate change, different, socioeconomic changes and migration, things like that, the giants receded down into the Earth. The Earth's surface wasn't able to sustain them anymore, so they receded down into the Earth. Well, about 150 years in our future, they start reemerging from the Earth. And then about 100 years after that is when our story takes place, where people have kind of become sequestered to more like walled cities and protected structures. So it's a little bit of like a futuristic, sort of post-apocalyptic, sort of cyberpunk, sort of battle manga comic. So so it pulls from a lot of like a lot of my favorite influences, at least as far as manga is concerned. It was like if I were to make my version of a manga, then like what would it be? And this was the concept that I landed on, for that. So I've got like I consider influences of it. I know that like from the elevator pitch, it even kind of sounds similar to Attack on Titan, but that wasn't really an influence on me. But more so things like Akira is a huge influence. That's one of my primary influences, my favorite comics. So that one is huge. But Tekkon Kincrete by Taiyo Matsumoto is another one. Battle Angel Alita is another big influence on it. And actually, even so, like one thing as far as just like the team dynamics of the comics goes are very influenced by like early the first 50 issues of X-Force also. So it's kind of like a lot of elements of those things kind of put together into a story that basically I wanted to tell. So this first story, it's about this team. Laser Storm is a team basically in the future of, they're all human misfits that are giant slayers. So they're essentially mercenaries that are hired by people to either take care of giant problems or to, exterminate a giant that's kind of been terrorizing their community or village. So
gotcha.
So that's essentially what they do. I guess kind of like Ghostbusters for giants in the future, And that's a bad description, but that's just that's just to give you an idea of, I guess, the service they provide. But they also so giants have skin that's impenetrable by bullets. It's too thick, so bullets don't affect them, like the calibers that we use in our like modern warfare and stuff like that don't affect these giants. These giants of the future. So our team of mercenaries, they use only laser-based weapons. Because lasers can still penetrate and cut through, the giant's appendages and bodies. So
gotcha.
So that's where the title Laser Storm Giant Slayers comes from, and that's the title of this first arc is Laser Storm Giant Slayers into the Nether Ghetto, because the MacGuffin for our story is like a secret military weapon that's been stolen by a giant and then taken down deep into like the depths of the earth where the giants had like receded down into an underground city called like Tartarus City. The outskirts of that, there's a ghetto for giants called the Nether Ghetto, which is underground, and that's where this MacGuffin element is that our team is like searching out in this first story. So
Okay.
um, so that's essentially kind of in a nutshell what Laser Storm is. The one sentence thing to say would be like a team of misfits in the future hunts down and kills giants. So that's like the most simple way of saying it, I suppose.
It definitely sounds like something that I would enjoy reading. All these different ones that you're coming out with, man. I really like the way that you're describing these, and I will definitely be picking these up. So
well, thanks, man. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so yeah, for Laser Storm right now, I'm serializing it page by page on Patreon.
Okay.
I have 2 zines that I've made of the first couple chapters, so I do have those. I bring those with me to shows, and if people specifically request them, I'll send it to them. I don't really like to. I don't think that I have those available for ordering online because I do prefer that. It feels kind of weird to have people pay for the Patreon and then just have them available also elsewhere. But
right.
But that is one of the things is that like with Patreon, you get to see the pages as I finish them too. I also post, process things and stuff like that. So, so that's like the main venue for Laser Storm. But definitely hit me up, man. I can just send you a few of the zines if you're interested in checking them out. No doubt.
Yeah, definitely, man. So we're kind of coming up close to a close here. I've just got a few more questions for you before I get you off of here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any advice for maybe a young artist that's just starting out or just discovering that they have a talent for this?
Well, I guess I would say a couple things. The first would be just continue drawing. Like if you were an artist, just keep on drawing, figure out the areas of improvement, the areas that the best way that I've always been able to figure out where I need to improve is what's the least fun for me to draw. So usually whatever it is that you're trying to avoid drawing that you don't want to draw, that's the area that you actually need to focus on to be able to hone your craft and actually get better. So I would say that first and foremost. But the best thing to do with that is just to keep on drawing every single day. So I would say that, and then I also like I've said this before, kind of in talks that I've given and lectures and stuff, and to mixed results because a lot of people just like to hear kind of feel good things. But I also would say another 2 things I would say is one, do not, I guess, be beholden to outside validation for yourself or your artwork. Don't do it just because you want other people to do it. Like if it's a thing that you enjoy and love doing, then do it for the sake of that and the feelings that it gives you, definitely more so than whether people accept it online or social media or something like that. Like don't draw for notes, I guess I would say. And then the other thing that I've said to mixed results is that as a young artist, you need to know that like as you start working professionally, you are your sole single advocate. Like it's very rare that maybe unless you find somebody that's able to kind of mentor you and help, hold your hand along the way. A lot of artists don't have that, and they don't realize that like they need to advocate for themselves. A lot of artists don't realize that every job that they do is a negotiation, and the negotiation is how much they're willing to put up with for how little. So you need to know your self-worth. You need to be confident in yourself and your abilities, at least enough to the point that you won't let somebody, you won't be so desperate to work that you'll do whatever it takes, because that just kind of creates a recipe for being taken advantage of. And like my first few years doing professional work in the comics industry, I was taken advantage of multiple times, just as far as the amount of work that I put in, not being paid for the work that I did, people being dishonest and disingenuous, So, and that's any business. It's not just comics, but like, you kind of have to have a little bit of emotional resolve to be able to get over those things without being like, well, I'm just going to throw in the towel and just not do this anymore. Like, just know that like you do need to advocate for yourself. I wish that it wasn't that way. I wish that there was some sort of system in place that made sure that young artists weren't able to be taken advantage of, but that's not how it is. And I feel like it's kind of like a vicious cycle, you know. So
yeah,
I hate seeing it happen. I hate seeing young artists, you know, on social media talk about being, you know, their burnout or how they're not getting any traction or how they're in a terrible deal or whatever it is. And a lot of those situations, I know for a fact can be avoided on the front end of them, kind of just by I know experience is the key element that I have, but just by keeping, you know, be confident in yourself, know your self-worth, don't allow people to walk all over you. If you find yourself in a bad situation where you've made a commitment but you're owed tons of money, you can leave that commitment. A commitment is two-way. Like if you have an agreement with somebody and they are not holding up their end of the agreement, then unless you've signed a contract or something like that, you know, and you're in some sort of tangle, I would say walk away from that situation and don't work with those people anymore. So I've stayed far too long in bad situations where I'm working on this project or this book, and the hole just keeps on getting deeper, you know. And rather than, you know, it always feels awkward and uncomfortable whenever you have to address situations like that. But I would say that you will feel so much better on the other end of it if you do. And nothing feels better than saying no to somebody that is not doing right by you too. So it feels like it's going to be really scary at first, but then once you actually start sticking up for yourself, you'll see that like they'll keep coming back to you. They'll keep wanting you to do stuff for them. So like that won't end. If that's the fear, if the fear is, you know, that I'm not going to find work again, there will be work to do, even though it might not be exactly what you want to do all the time. But I would just say that be your own advocate, and just keep on drawing. As far as like advice to artists that want to learn the technical skills, like look at the artists that you love, study their storytelling. One of the best things that you can be able to do is to be able to look at an image and story and be able to analyze how it was put together. So it's called reverse engineering, you know, whenever you see how something is built and you try and do the backwards process of how they got to that final point. So so there's certain artists that are just amazing storytellers, like Eduardo Riso, Frank Quitely, you know, Jeff Darrow. These people, like those are some of my all-time favorites. And it's like, if I'm feeling like I'm in the storytelling bind or a creative bind or something, I can like flip open some books that those guys have drawn, just try and study how they lay out a page, how they're telling the story, how they're moving the eye and the flow of information and the narrative. And like just kind of trying to think about that and analyzing that will help a ton too. And for me, it gives me ideas, and like that sort of thing gets my creative juices flowing. So I'll be able to look at work by an artist that I love and be like, all right, well, that gives me an idea for how I'll want to do a page in the future, you know, and then I'll come back to it and try and utilize that. So I would say those things. So hopefully that's a good note.
Yeah, definitely. So people want to follow you. How can they do that?
I think I'm on most of the bigger social media sites. I'm on Twitter and Facebook. I've got a website, bustermoody.com. And you should be able to find everything through there. If you want a commission, I do all of my original art sales and commissions through Inky Knuckles comic art now. So if you're looking for a commission, you can send an email to inky@inkyknuckles.com. Just with the subject Buster Moody commission inquiry, and they'll be able to send you my rates and everything like that. Otherwise, you should be able to find everything through my website. So awesome. And do you maybe have anything coming up that you want to talk about before I get you off of here? Not so much. Since my family's kind of in the midst of a big move right now, I haven't been pursuing any projects. I guess I could say later on this month, I did do a variant cover for TMNT 150, the final issue of the current IDW series. Okay. So I did do it's a retailer incentive 1 in 10 variant cover. So hopefully, you know, enough people shops have subscriptions so they can get copies of that. But if you're looking for, you know, the next thing that I'm putting out, that's the next published work that I have that will be coming out. So
Awesome.
I think the original publishing date was next week. I think maybe it got pushed back though. So, but that'll be coming out this month. Whenever issue 150 of the current TMNT Ninja Turtles series drops, one of the variant covers will be one that I drew and colored. So
awesome. All right, man. Well, it has been great talking to you tonight. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jared. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and maybe I can get you back on here and we can talk more about, you know, different comic books and things like that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Anytime. Yeah, I'll be moving, but you know, once the dust has settled, I'd definitely be down.
Awesome. Have a good night, man. I will talk to you next time.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you, man.
Wrestling fans, join us for the Diamond State Flawless TV recordings live in front of a studio audience. Every 2 weeks, join us in the Diamond Dome for the best live independent wrestling. Diamond State Wrestling is on the road to crowning the second annual King and Queen of Diamonds. You never know what's going to happen or what you'll see in Diamond State Wrestling. The show is called Flawless. It's every other Sunday at the Diamond Dome in Springdale, Arkansas in the Next Level Soccer Center. Doors open at 3 o'clock with bell time at 4. Tickets start at $10 for general admission and $5 for children. For more information, check out DiamondStateWrestling.com.
Hey listeners, I'm glad you're enjoying what you're listening to. I'm Billy from Zero to Hero Podcast. I'll always be joined by Jim, and me and him are the Polk and Skull Podcasting. Definitely, if you love what you're listening to, then come swing on by Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you find your podcast, we'll be there too.
All right, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed that episode with Buster Moody. He was a lot of fun to talk with, and he was a great guest, and I can't wait to have him on again. I've got to talk to him a little bit more since then, and I think we've got some cool stuff lined up for you guys to hear next time as well. While you're waiting on a new episode to drop of If You Give a Data podcast, why don't you check out my podcast networks, the OIW Podcast Network, the Zero to Hero Podcast Network, and the Avenue Podcast Network. They all have great stuff on there, different types of shows that I'm sure that you guys will enjoy, and it'll keep you busy until it's time to come back for another one of these. Also, I have merch out. If you want any of that stuff, make sure that you hit me up on either social media or email. Tell me what size you need. Tell me which one you want, and we'll get that shipped right out to you. As the show ends, you hear a song when I say I love you and goodbye and stuff, and that is Geek. Geek created that song for this podcast. He's an amazing artist who creates all kinds of great music. I believe he is about to create another album. He's kind of going through the alphabet, and I believe he is on O. So go out there, check out his stuff. He is a monster when it comes to creating new content. Amazing guy, funny guy. Does some really funny stuff on TikTok. That's actually how I found him. So go and follow him and show him some love if you like the way that sounds. So I want to give a shout out to Original Geek. They have brought me in to be a part of the whole thing that they have going on, and I'm very thankful to be a part of that. They've put my podcast advertisement in the last two comics, the Paladin comic and the 8th Day comic, so that's really cool, and I'm just happy to be a part of them, seeing where things are going, and I'm going to be doing some really cool stuff with them in the near future. There is a few things going on right now. If you want to get the 3rd issue of Vengeance, the pre-orders are available now, so make sure that you go out there on the website and get your pre-order ordered now. And also, you'll be seeing us at different places. PTX Con, as I'm recording this, is less than a week away. This drops on Monday, so as you're hearing this, you're just a few days away from PTX Con in Paris, Texas. If you're in the area, make sure that you come out and say hi to me, and you say hi to them. I'll have t-shirts. We'll be right over there by where they're going to have the wrestling show at PTX Con. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy the whole thing there. And maybe you can get you some merch there as well, get you some comic books, and meet some really cool people. I know a few wrestlers that are going to be there. In fact, there's one or two that I've actually had on this podcast that are going to be wrestling at that show. So make sure that you come out. I think that Fuego del Sol is going to be there, and Sam Stackhouse is going to be there, so it's definitely going to be a blast. We've got all kinds of crazy, awesome events that are coming up. We're also going to be at Matrotham Con in Chattanooga, Tennessee next month. It is the 17th, 18th, and 19th, I believe, is when we will be there. So if you are in Chattanooga and you're hearing this and you want to come by and see us and see what we have going on, make sure that you do that as well. So you've heard me talk about this. I've branched out. I have 2 new channels that are out when it comes to the If You Give a Dad a brand, and that is If You Give a Dad a YouTube channel and If You Give a Dad a Cosplay. Now, the YouTube channel, that is ran by Ty. He is one of my friends that I've been on his podcast. He's been on mine, and he goes and shows you that it isn't, all this crazy stuff that you have to create a YouTube channel or to edit videos and stuff. And he kind of breaks that down for you to be able to do this stuff yourself. So go out there and follow him. He's doing some really cool stuff. And the other one is If You Give a Dad a Cosplay, and that is ran by Cosplay Dude 637. He is another guy that I've had on here. I believe twice I've had him on my show so far. And always a lot of fun to talk to, but he does cosplays. And he kind of gives you a breakdown of, you can make your own stuff and it doesn't have to cost an exorbitant amount of money to be able to do this. And he's a dad himself, so he has his kids that get involved with this as well. He's also going to be interviewing different cosplayers on there, but that's called, like I said, called If You Give a Dad a Cosplay. Make sure you go and check both of those out. I will have links to both of them in my show notes. I'm so excited about branching out like I am. And it's just going to be fun, and there's going to be more stuff coming down the line. Just stay tuned for that as well. So you hear me talking about social media. Make sure that you follow me on all of them. I am pretty much on every single one of them. Just go and look me up If You Give a Dad a Podcast in the search bar, and you should find me. I should be the first 10 to 15 results on Google as well, so make sure that you go and hit me up there. And if you want to send me an email, send it to giveadadapodcast@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you guys. If you want to get merch that way, that's a good way to do it. Or if you just want to send me a line, make sure that you do that. So as you're listening to this, make sure that you do me a favor. And it's not very big, but it helps out so much more than you know. And that is to rate and review this episode. Like, share, and subscribe to it. The more people that review this and rate this episode and rate this podcast, the more likely I am to be recommended to more people. And I would love it to see this podcast grow even bigger than what it is right now. And like I said, hit that notification bell. That way you are notified when a new episode of iGadap drops. So we've come to the end of another episode of If You Give a Dad a Podcast. And it is time for Billy's favorite part of the episode, and that is Dad Joke of the Week. Why didn't the vampire attack Taylor Swift? She had bad blood.
Bro.
All right. I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Room rounded, but I got a podcast on. He calls us beautiful people, then tells us who we have on. The best part of my day, though we're blocked out in my pods. Tell my friends all about it so that they follow along. And the host is kinda nerdy, but guess what I am as well. I don't feel so alone, and I began walking out of my shell. Heard a story, I need a connection I haven't felt. I'll be looking for the next one, till then farewell. It's the podcast for me. Have it on, better go see. Listen closely, download and tune in remotely. It's the podcast for me.
podcast is part of the OIW Podcasting Network.
My wife keeps sending me TikToks while I'm trying to record this. Bah!